The topic for the moment right now is effectively using podcasts to engage and communicate. I'll repeat the topic for you all once again. It's effectively using podcasts to engage and communicate. The session is going to be chaired by Udit Pathak, founder and director, Media Mamtaa. Can we have a huge round of applause for Mr. Udit Pathak, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you so much for being with us over here. We have some wonderful speakers joining for this session as well, ladies and gentlemen. Can I please have up on stage Darshan Shah, co-founder and CEO from NewsReach as well. Thank you so much, sir. Welcome once again. We have Mamtaa Dhingra, global PR consultant and podcaster, Lateral Sutraa over here as well. Thank you so much. Give it up for Mamtaa, ma'am, please, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. And we also have Vaishali Sood, who's the Senior Managing Editor, Integration, NDTV. Can we please have a huge round of applause for her as well, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, we also have Mr. Uday Pratap Singh, editor of NewsX. A huge round of applause for him as well, please. Wonderful man. Known him for many years. Always a pleasure to meet. All right, so the stage is set. The plan for the podcast is ready. Looking forward to learn a lot more personally. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, guys. Good evening. Namaskar. Can I say good evening and namaskar to all of you guys? All right. So, guys, this is a topic which is very close to my heart these days. I've recently started podcast, and I've become a podcaster apart from leading a public relation firm called Media Mamtaa. You know, when Bijoya came to me and she asked me about, will you want to moderate the session? I said, who are the panelists? And she said, there will be 2 people from media. And guys, I'm on the opposite side, and it really feels very, different experience to question anchors who questions everyone. Thank you. Right? So, I think very, very important topic, looking at the current scenario of the communication industry, and also how the marketing initiatives are going right now when it comes to podcast. Today we have a very diverse panelist. We have Darshan, who himself runs a PR tech firm. Darshan is the founder. We also have a podcaster, another podcaster called Mamtaa Dhingra on show. She also runs her own podcast. And then we have Vaishali, who's the senior editor of NDTV, and also Uday Pratap, who is the editor of NewsX. Without further delay, let me set the context straight and start with the questions. I think, guys, my first question to everyone, and we can start with Uday, with you, is why do you think the entire industry is growing currently, the podcast industry?
So firstly, thank you very much for that question, and thank you to Ad Gully and the organizers of today's event for having us. It's appropriate. It's the IMAGEXX 2024 Summit, so it's appropriate you have someone from NewsX, firstly, here. And as Udit was reminding me, he's of course been on our channel on a show hosted by me. So today, tables have turned. He's asking me the questions. But I think, podcast is the buzzword today, really. And earlier, it used to be, of course, restricted to digital media. Today, podcasts have truly gone mainstream. I think, the moment it starts coming on television news channels, it's gone mainstream. And I think it's headed in a great direction because we've seen, of course, a lead taken in the industry with big anchors, well-known faces all start their own podcasts. I myself have not yet started my own one, but I've contributed to a few on the channel, and I'm also facilitating a few for our editor-in-chiefs, etc. So I am, clearly in the podcast thing, and I think every time I meet my owner, they say, "When are you starting your podcast?" It's not when are you doing your next interview, when are you starting your podcast? So it's clearly a buzzword. I think that pretty much sums it all up, and we'll talk more about it, but I'll hand over to the others for their opening comments.
Yeah, I think Uday summed it up quite well. Podcast is the buzzword, and news organizations, I have to say, have come into the game a little late. So a lot of individual podcasters like yourselves have taken the lead, and we're playing a little bit of a catch-up here right now. But it's a great, great medium. It's a great medium and another distribution platform, so to say, of content. And one of the wonderful things about podcasts is it's a slow medium. It's a medium where you can have long conversations, where you can have long, meaningful conversations. And in this rush of news that we live in constantly, it's a great space to sort of bring back those long conversations that used to be an interesting part of news and storytelling.
Thank you once again, Gully. Thanks, Udit, for that introduction. And yeah, podcast is the pause, I think, in all of our lives, all of our busy schedules where we are lost. And podcast has come and hit us at a right time because the way the content was booming and inundating us, podcast has made sure that we get our sanity back into the whole humdrum. It's a new wave which has been around for over 10 years, which was never recognized to this level. But yes, some of the podcasters have made this really relevant for us to not go untouched with this wave. So it is here to stay, and more as we go along.
Hello, everyone. So thanks, Adgali, Sudhir, Bijoya, for having us here. So mainly, I was just reading up that why the podcast is getting so popular and all. So the report says that 43% of your company is going, 43% are the chances. If your founder is good, your thought leadership is good, then it's likely to succeed in your business. And I think, podcast provides that platform to your thought leadership, the way they come up with their thoughts, ideas. And that platform, somewhere down the line, it was missing. It was just, a bilateral communication earlier in the form of interviews only, which was getting, I guess, monotonous and all. And this provides, the influencer space came in along with the podcast that is making, wonders. So this is what, why it is working so good is because of the lot of innovation which is happening within the space, and podcast is providing that platform.
And I'll just quote another example apart from, of course, what the owner of our channel told me. I'm going to quote him here, the host of today's summit outside. Yes, there he is. He told me off record, but I'm saying it on record, कि आज कोई session सुनूं ना सुनूं, आपका session ज़रूर सुनूंगा आप लोगों का, because podcast is his interest area as well. So I think that says a lot.
Hello. Okay, yeah, absolutely. I think that's how the industry is growing, and also the fact that a lot of communication people are also, inching and working towards it for sure, right? I want to ask this question, especially to you both media guys. When you talk about, podcast, there's one thing which keeps coming back is the content, right? How do you guys create different content when it comes to podcast? Because, in media, you are actually everywhere. You talk about being on channel, on print, online, video, you're everywhere. But how do you differentiate that, right? There could be, that, okay, this is the content which will go to the podcast, this is the content which will come on air live in front of your target audience.
So I think, it's a lot with the presentation as well. So of course you can have big names doing it. I think Barkha Dutt has her own podcast now. You have Smita Prakash, who's also doing one at ANI. But how do you differentiate becomes the big question, and I think that's what you're trying to ask us as well. How do you create different content? So you create different content, of course, by the guests you get. You create different content by the presentation and the look, because earlier podcasts you thought it would only be audio. But now it's video, right, as well. So you've got to, spruce up your presentation. So maybe for a podcast, I wouldn't be dressed how I am today. I would perhaps be in a cooler look, because podcast is something that is catering to Gen Z as well. And they want to see a, more casual, relaxed atmosphere and relaxed conversation. That's why politicians also, I know that's a, topic you'll also be talking about later. That's why politicians are also, going to podcasts today, and ministers as well, because they want to cater to a different audience. And that's something brands are also going to do. You all are all PR people. So, brands are also wanting to cater to different audiences, and podcasts give them that. You spruce it up also through the presentation. So, for instance, one of our shows, it's an all-black setting. So, there's just black behind the anchor who's hosting the podcast, and there's just black behind the guest. So that, kind of gives a very cool look when you're watching it on television, and you really get engrossed. It seems like, you're in an interrogation room, or, that kind of vibe and atmosphere. You also, differentiate content in your podcasts by also putting out there what you wouldn't necessarily on television. TV, I know now the lines are getting blurred as well, because TV is also, as Vaishali said, we were late to the party, but we've arrived at the party now. We are now also getting podcasts as part of our mainstream news content as well. In fact, every conclave we do, we have a separate podcast section. Now I'm actually thinking aloud, we perhaps might have a podcast on stage as well at our next conclave. So it's mainstream definitely. But it would be your different questions to what you would ask in a formal interview. That's what would differentiate the two. And finally, I think you would also, cater to a digital audience as well. We all know that the future is going digital. And if we in television do not understand that, then we're going to die a natural death. So we've got to, become TV and digital companies. You cannot just be a TV company, or you cannot just be a digital company. You have to, mainstream everything. And to cater to the digital audience, podcasts are really working by getting the kind of views on YouTube or Instagram and Twitter and wherever else. And the rest Vaishali can add.
Yeah, a lot of what Uday said, but as editors, when we think of what will go into a podcast, for us, it's really the story behind the story. So the story that's happened, that's broken, everyone's spoken about it, it's been tweeted about, broken on TV, etc. But what is the actual story behind the story? And if you look at podcasts through that lens, it lets you really get behind the scenes, lets you get to the granular details that you're possibly going to miss in like a 2-minute package. And also gets you to speak with a very diverse set of people who, on a day-to-day basis, you don't have space for on a television channel. So that's a lens we put on podcasts at NDTV, and and then there's also obviously the daily news podcast. So we have this podcast called The News with NDTV, which is a 10-minute capsule of the day's events. The storytelling in that is again very not rushed. It's really telling you what you need to know without the fluff. And it is also a mix of stories. So it's not just the top political stories of the day. It's a mix of politics, sports, lifestyle, some wonderful news that's taken place somewhere in the world. So I feel like for a podcast, for an audience that's looking for podcasts, that's the kind of content that they would want and expect from a news network. And I think that's where all of us are moving towards.
Yeah. And podcasts earlier, as I was saying also, one just thought when you looked at podcasts, it can just be cool and casual. That's it. But now it's adapted. Like say when the Ranveer Alabadia show started, and that's again another podcast that the youth really connects to. You wouldn't, you would see him with actors, sports people, maybe nutrition people, fitness influencers, but you wouldn't necessarily imagine that you would see him with a Piyush Goyal or a Nitin Gadkari or Rajnath Singh. But now, as I was saying earlier, the lines are blurring.
I'd like to add to that.
Hello?
Should I just take
Hello?
over? No.
I think something happens with Mike, and Mike also wants the anchors to do the job and not me questioning you guys. All right, so while we talked about the content, how do you select when it comes to podcasts? I also want to talk to a podcaster, and you have also hosted. I think your company has hosted around 10, 12 podcasts. So the question is basically, how do you guys question the people who are coming on the show? Because, if you look at, as he was talking about Ranbir's show, I've seen on Ranbir's show, there are politicians also going, right? And you have also talked about Gen Z. If Gen Z is also going to see the similar guests, they might get bored, frankly speaking, and they don't have patience to go through it because they watch podcasts because they want everything very quick, right? So Mamtaa, how do you select, and Darshan to you as well, how do you select your guest, and how do you select the content which goes out to your guests?
Yeah, so I think the answer to that for me would be very simple because as a content creator, let me understand why am I there in the game in the first place. Why did podcasts happen to me? Because I genuinely had questions in my head which I wanted answers to. Very unlike a media or a publication house, which will be very tied up with its editorial guidelines or its brand image, I am not tied to that. So as a podcaster, I have that leverage. As a content creator, I have that leverage and a creative freedom. And you could be seeing the same guests on my show, your show, and someone else's show, which could be either on a television news channel or maybe somewhere else. But it's really the inquiry and the style of the podcaster that kind of defines the content. So you can obviously become a specialist at that as you continue to do certain things in a certain way. You can develop, you can change, you can evolve. I mean, just like how Uday very rightly said that nobody would have expected a Nitin Gadkari on Ranveer's show, but that's the evolution, right? People started relating to Ranveer and his conversations with the style that he would put it out to. So for me, it is the genuine inquiry to know the person behind the profile or the persona that my guest is carrying. So for me, the questions is not about how did he make it to the success. For me, the questions will be about the challenges and failures and disappointments and things that he had to face to be where he is. So the story will start very differently for me. Yeah.
So in our case, Mamtaa actually rightly said, the persona matters, everything, But more on our end, when we are looking from the business point of view, we are looking this as a vertical in our business. So we would be, I'd say, only PR tech company having one particular vertical doing press release distribution. And the second vertical which we started is completely into podcast. And, when we did our first complete podcast series, there, we understood that something or the other, the topics which are not being touched, you have to pick up those topics, the niche you have to create, and then you have to go to the market leader and tell them that, if you do this, okay, this will be something very popular, will get very popular, this kind of audience has never been touched. And in our case, it was AWS. So we spoke with AWS, we told them, now when you go to Shark Tank, it's only maybe, tier 3, tier 2 guys are coming up. And if you talk about the big ones, unicorns, but nobody is talking about the middle layer, okay, which are the companies in the B2B and B2C space, which are doing wonderfully well. And they are also profitable, but their stories have not come out. Let that be Chalo, Blue Smart, and even for, Go Quick, Soul Store, MobiQuick. So a lot of those stories were, very important. So when we decided the show structure, we told them, let's have it into complete, a couple of, I would say, segments into place. One segment, we talked about the ground up journey which they had. Second was like I would say, rapid fire round that they had to answer in a very short that what kind of, challenges they faced and what were the, the angel investor which came to their rescue when they did not have any funds. How was their first experience about the fundraise and a couple of other things. And the third segment, which came in was particularly that coming from the audience, coming from the partners. Okay, so this was something, engaging at the ground level. So somewhere down the line, the content has to be that way, which is more engaging and covers everything on the persona side.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I very jokingly say to my PR colleagues and people that I meet that the podcast, for me, my podcast is not about what nation wants to know. It's actually about what really, really I want to know, and in the way that I want to know it. So it begins from there, and obviously, once you have a following and an audience base, then you pick on the pulse that what is being liked out of your own content, where is the wave moving? Can I create more of the same, or can I keep experimenting with that? Unlike maybe let's a television show or a news capsule or a news segment, which will ongoingly, continue to be in a certain format. So I think that's the creative freedom of the content.
So talking about unfiltered conversation, that's what we're talking about.
Yes.
And that also brings to my next question where we talk about, do you all see there should be some standardization of metrics or tools that will be developed to actually gauge the impact of the podcast? Because a lot of people, if you actually look today, in the last 1 year or so, I've almost met more than 60, 70 startups and looked more than 60, 70 different entrepreneurs. Out of them, at least 10, 20 people have their own podcast, right? And, there's too much of content for everyone. So, there should be some kind of standardization. There should be some kind of metrics. That's when you will realize what value podcasts will bring in, right?
Yeah, possibly, at the end of the day, you also have to decide whether, you believe a podcast success is because of its quality or because of its quantity. If it's quality, then you'll probably look at, the kind of guests coming in, the production value, the style of anchoring, the way of asking questions, the questions themselves. If you're looking at quantity, you're going to look at views. How many views does it have on YouTube? What are the episodes? Are they in millions? Are they in thousands? Or are just 10 people viewing them? So that it depends. Are you looking at quality or quantity? Then are you going to get an external agency to do it? We in the TV news industry know about the rating system. So first, of course, it was TAM. Then it's BARC now. A lot of channels, though, are not in BARC. I don't think NDTV is in BARC. We aren't in BARC either at NewsX and India News anymore. So, then it becomes, the question of which rating agency as well. And I know where you're coming from, because some sort of metrics or measurements is required, because that's the way you attract brands, right? To sponsor a podcast or ally with a particular show or property, you want to show how much reach it has. So that's something for people to ponder over. But yes, eventually, if this is the way we're going, then yes, maybe there will be an agency for this as well.
Yeah, so in a platform like YouTube, it's there to see, right? And the numbers are there the views are there to see. Now, whether you boosted them, not boosted them is irrelevant. But the numbers are there to see, and similarly on these distribution platforms. So slightly different from how TV ratings were judged. Here, it's a little bit more democratic in how content is judged. And so standardization, I think the tools that already exist. And what will work and will not work will actually depend upon the quality of your podcast, right? And the reach that it is able to generate and the reach that you as an individual are able to generate. A lot of podcasts work wonderfully through word of mouth. And, and a lot of podcasts work because you've managed to pull in some great guests. And then a lot of podcasts work because, as you said, Mamtaa, due to the personality of the podcaster. So I think there's, in terms of, judging the success of the podcast, the numbers are nowhere close to what regular videos generate. But I mean, matrix exists.
Because, then there becomes a question for a brand. Say you're a brand and you're looking at two shows, and one has, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million. But then there's the other which has great guests, big guests, and the quality is amazing. And perhaps the interviewer is a really renowned face. Do you go for that one, or do you go for the one which simply may have whatever it has, but has 2 million, 3 million, 4 million? Maybe we just have, Big Boss stars, for instance, and has 2 million, 3 million, 4 million. So there's that question. So will a metrics help in that direction, or will a brand just rely on its PR team and marketing team?
What's your take?
Counter question.
I think they will be a slice of pie for everyone. because they will always be very niche content creators. If we look back at the origin of audio content, for example, that never got defined, its success never got defined by the numbers. Its success always got defined by the level of interest that audience was giving you, even if they were 10. So, for example, if I am hosting the show, and my audience for year-on-year growth remains to be the size of a room full of these people. So that's enough for me, because I am catering to that niche. So it totally depends on, what's your vision also as a content creator, and what remains relevant to you as a content creator.
So ROI is subjective. So when corporate is doing some podcast, their ROI in their mind will be completely different as compared to if anybody else is doing. Maybe some of the youngsters, they are doing a very good podcast and they are generating millions in views, but they never see the the standardization, that what kind of views I'll be gathering, what sort of. They just want to make that interesting, and that's what this is, when it comes to standardization, I don't think so. We are very early actually to speak about this. But at least when we, get into this, and a couple of years down the line, I think, based on the reach, of course, the subscriber numbers you see, the engagement that creates, and everything else. And mainly, when we were doing our podcast, so we were seeing that reels are performing very well. Whereas the long form content, and we saw the percentile view, we were hardly seeing 50% people going above that 50 percentile views, and they were not even consuming the whole content. But whereas in case of reels, which is 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute maximum, okay, we were having more than 90-95% retention ratios, and there were a lot of replays. So, of course, the content for short form content is performing way better, and the other, the standardization per se, it's difficult as of now to comment.
I don't know what is happening. Okay, so I think let's come to the brand side also, right? I believe, I will just give you an example. I went for a pitch. I also run a PR firm, as I said, right? So I went for a pitch, and that pitch stated a different SOW, which said that they need 7 podcasts in a quarter. And I was like, where did this number come from, right? And, brands have realized the power of this content, right? How do you see, especially the agency people, we have 2 PR professionals also, and you might also want to contribute towards it. How do you see this becoming a dedicated service when it comes to our industry, the PR firms, right? Because we have seen influencer management becoming a dedicated service, a dedicated practice. I've seen a lot of PR firms opening their own influencer management, different firms too. Darshan, when you spoke about PR, podcast, and you were the only one, keeping that in mind, we also launched something called Pure Reality with Udit, right? That's a show which I'm hosting, right? So that's a service, and mind you, there are a lot of brands who are inclined towards and want to participate. So how do you see the PR firms making this as a dedicated service and a dedicated, maybe the PNL as well?
So, of course, the dedicated service has to come, because the production of this, the host, this is going to define how your podcast is going to perform. And secondly, what we saw, what was the most selling point with AWS or even with any corporate branch which we are talking, is mainly about the amplification which is being done along with the podcast. Because when you see the podcast, so khali baat kiya, wo digital reh gaya and chhod diya. But if you are able to amplify that across, all the other mediums which is available, let us say you do a half a page print article on Mint, okay, that's the way we did it. Then you do a radio promotions on that, you do digital PR on that, and then you let influencers talk about your podcast as well. So there are a lot of things, which is to be done in order to make that more popular. And, rightly Vaishali said that this is more like a word of mouth. Why we know Ranveer and Raj Shamani and all? Because everybody somewhere down the line has watched. And we have seen, let us say, hundreds of podcasts, but we talk about 2 or 3 or 5. Reason being, it's very popular. So we just need to make that popular and it has to be amplified fully 360 degree. And then you see this as a potential that yes, that can be a dedicated service where you're going to make money.
Now, coming from the PR perspective, because I don both the hats, so so long as there will be scope for interesting stories to be told, anything that keeps adding into that category will be added to PR. So podcasts, like we have been speaking about, allows for a very democratic view on any kind of theme, any kind of storytelling, even a personal and a deeper dive. So I think where PR industry will look at it and clients will look at it as a solution is to bring the other side of the story. So it can be more humanitarian, it can be more in-depth, it can be more authentic, and one is not compelled to just put out a business position to the story. One can take a very independent stance and a voice. So long as leaders will keep acknowledging that, and this platform very beautifully allows that democracy, I think this will be a very relevant KRA for PR.
Yeah. Shah, do you have anything in mind?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you guys have encapsulated it. We have a similar struggle, right, where somebody can say, give us something in news, in print, in digital, and also podcast. But what strategy will work where is something to be thought about. And pure play PR, I don't see it working in the podcast space. But behind the scenes of a brand, the storytelling of a brand, the personification on the brand, I think those are kind of stories that one can look at and collaborate on. There used to be a show on CNBC which was on ads, right? And so what's behind that ad, the story behind the ad, those are the kind of conversations one can hold on podcasts where I mean, I think this space would be more suited for that kind of content.
Yeah, the moment something looks too staged or paid or put on, it's going to fall flat, because at the end of the day, podcast is meant to be raw, real, bare, right? That's where it's different. Otherwise, it would just be like any other content.
I'd just like to add that, again, from the PR perspective, see, like Vaishali has said that already, that podcast allows for a long form. And through PR or a news article, you can only achieve so much. So, for example, if I am a menstrual hygiene brand, in an article or an interview, business interview, I could only say so much. But if I actually commission a podcast series, which is an educational wellness program around that, like a podcast show, of course, I will resonate with my community, and there'll be a better shelf life. And then coming to the part of digital, because podcast is a digital medium. Now, you've created a digital asset for life. Yes. So if you are published on Spotify, if you're published on YouTube, which is your own platform, like your own channel, then you're there forever. Yeah. The news article and can actually go incognito after a point in time. It will still have a shelf life. Yeah.
The watch says time's up, so we want to keep this conversation going. But last question from my side would be on key takeaways. What are the challenges and the changes you foresee in this industry? I will start with Uday, then Vaishali, Mamtaa, and Darshan.
Well, changes, will come in, because it's, as I said, a very new sort of, buzzword podcast, right? So the future is looking very, very bright for it right now. This is just the start. I think there's a lot more potential in this space for everyone, both in TV and in digital, and of course on the brand side and corporate side, for government as well. They often say that why films become a effective means of reaching an audience, is because of the visual medium. And again, this is again another medium where you can send a message out. She cited the example of, Mamtaa cited the example of menstrual awareness. That's something that, again, film like Padman did as well. And there have been other films as well on various other issues. So podcasts, yes, can also be used to spread social messages, but can also be used to, work well with brands as well for corporates. And they can also, of course, be used for some cool content, which they are initially meant for, which it was initially meant for.
Yeah, I mean, just very quickly, isn't it wonderful that audio is back in play? There's too much focus on visuals. It's good to go back to audio and the quieter world of audio. So I think there's a huge, huge scope. And it's a sign of our times that a podcast is back in play, where people want to slow down, listen, and really get into the grips with the story. So I think there's a lot of space to grow.
But the TV person in me will say that, see, this is why podcast में भी video की ज़रूरत थी, जो video आ गया
Podcast रहेगा.
मैं इस पे 2-3 चीज़ें बोलना चाहूँगी. वन इज़ ऑफ कोर्स जब तक हम अडेप्ट करते रहेंगे, डिजिटल आया, बहुत कुछ आया, एंड अ लॉट ऑफ थिंग्स हैव चेंज्ड ऑल्सो. So long as a tool or a medium like podcast will keep adapting, ऑडियो आया, वीडियो बना, अब शायद लाइव पॉडकास्ट होंगे, लाइक हाउ उदय सेड, मे बी वी वुड लाइक टू जस्ट डू अ पॉडकास्ट आउट ऑफ एनी प्लेस. वाई अ स्टूडियो, वाई रिस्ट्रिक्टेड टू अ स्टूडियो? So long as there will be that adaptability and agility, we will see a continuous growth of conversations that can be done via or through or calling it a medium like podcast. और पॉडकास्ट का जैसे हमारे वैदिक टेक्स्ट में बोला जाता है कि नॉलेज जो है वो पहले श्रवण और श्रुति से ही मिलती थी, और पॉडकास्ट में ये दोनों है.
So just a single key takeaway from the business point of view. Podcast will be sold only when it is integrated with any other services. This is what I personally feel, and I've seen that, done that. Integrated with any other services. Okay, and podcast standalone would be very difficult to sell.
Okay. Different people, different take. That's fine. Okay, so can I open this for the audience as well, and then we'll wrap it up? I know the time. So we'll take 2-3 questions if anyone wants to ask. She wants to ask. This question is for whom? Anyone? Anyone?
Big, yeah. It's at the end of the day, podcast, as I was saying earlier also, podcast is a podcast. You can do it any way you want. You can do it in any background, you can do it with any anchor, and you can do it in any language as well. And I think regional cinema is growing and booming, similarly regional podcast will also grow and boom. Right now it's only a lot in English and Hindi, but पूरा देश है और हमारा इतना विभिन्न देश है, विभिन्न भाषाओं का देश है, तो ज़रूर ये जो पॉडकास्ट है, मैं हिंदी में ही बोलना चाहूँगा ये कि मराठी में भी होंगे, पंजाबी में भी होंगे, असमीज़ में भी होंगे, कन्नड़ा में भी होंगे, हर भाषा में होंगे. सो आई थिंक द फ्यूचर इज ह्यूज फॉर रीजनल पॉडकास्ट एज वेल, 100%.
Yeah, I just like to answer your question. Actually, podcast में regional languages ही सबसे ज़्यादा booming है. Pulp fiction, crime, true crimes, जिन categories में education, जिन categories में podcast बढ़ रहा है, वो सबसे ज़्यादा regional में ही बढ़ रहा है.
Hi, so I have a question that in podcasts, do you think that generalized podcasts will work better, or will specialized focused podcasts work better? Like if I talk and give a parallel example of YouTube channels, right? Channels like FitTuber, Food Farmer, they specifically cover a certain topic. They have an audience which is very interested in that topic, and each video of theirs gets 10 million views, 12 million views, and they specifically focus on a certain topic. Now, going forward, because there is so much clutter which is going to be there in podcasts, which anybody can open a podcast, do you see specialized the way to go or general the way to go?
So, again, I have my personal opinion on this. Simply put, if any celebrity is there who is having the following, okay, I think they're the generalist, whatever they say, that will flourish. Okay, that will float like anything. But when it comes to specific, the niche one, I think, that's more educational oriented, whatever the targeted one, that should be the best ones to have actual view. There you are creating the audience, which is actually listening to you, and where they are interested. General में you are not targeting anyone. Everybody is getting targeted. So सबसे ज़्यादा मुझे लग रहा है जो चलेगा आगे जाके that would be niche ones and not the general ones.
I may disagree with that because of course you can't just be a jack of all trades, but if you are successful with a few, then you can then straddle different sectors. Ranveer is a great example, which we were citing earlier, that he started off with maybe actors, then he went to sports people, but then he ended up with politicians as well, and now of course he has other people. Again, Smita Prakash on ENI, she also has films. She had Ranjit, for instance. Then she also had Amit Shah. Then she now has Chirag Paswan. But she's also had, say, Gautam Gambhir as well. So, I think...
Yeah. I'd just like to answer it a little differently. May I? Rahul, for you. हमें यहाँ पे थोड़ा सा ग्लोबल सिटीज़न की तरह सोचना होगा. हम इंडिया में रहते हैं. बहुत बड़ी आबादी वाला देश है. हम नंबर्स से ऑब्सेस्ड हैं. बट जब मुझे अपने पॉडकास्ट पे अपने शो पे ग्लोबल इंक्वायरीज आती हैं और उन्हें मैं बोलती हूँ कि मेरी 10,000 ऑडियंस है, दे आर वेरी हैप्पी. सो दैट काइंड ऑफ आंसर्स योर क्वेश्चन इन अ वे. देयर विल बी रूम एंड स्कोप फॉर एवरीथिंग टू वर्क.
That niche is the way to go. I think podcasts will work in communities, much like YouTube videos as well. Podcasts will work in communities. It will cater to certain communities and interests, which is why a lot of organizations are now launching podcasts in various different niches to reach out to a wider audience in that sense, right? So yeah, that's my answer, and I think that time really is up. Yeah.
Any other question, guys? We don't have time. Sorry, guys. We can chat offline.
Please kindly take it forward offline. We generally do not have bandwidth.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you, AdGully, for hosting us.
Thank you so much. A huge round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen. Podcast is the present and podcast is going to be the trend for the future. Thank you so much. I'll request you all to pose for the shutters.